Everybody, my name is Harold Strong. I'm president of Medical Innovation Collaborative, and we are starting a series of conversations with some very interesting, innovative companies to kind of understand a little bit about more what they do, who they do it for, and how we can help. Again, Medical Innovation Collaborative is located in North Texas, but today we're happy to introduce you to Robert. Robert is a physician by training, but we're going to talk about his company and learn a little bit more about him and what his company does. Robert, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It's a joy to have you here today, and thanks for joining me online. I guess before we learn about your company and what you guys do, tell me a little bit about yourself. So you're a physician. Tell us what your practice is or was, where you live, that kind of thing.
Sure. I grew up in the regions of New York City, but I spent my first working career in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. I was a gastroenterologist. I joined a group of 2, and we became a group of 4, and then 8, and then one of the early mega groups, a group of 70. And during that time, I became quite active in helping run the adjacent to our office community hospital, which for a time had a lot of quality and safety problems. And I was, for a few years, chairman of the medical staff with about 1,000 doctors on staff, and I spent about a dozen years on the board. I had to retire in actually, I had to retire in 2014, and I moved to Israel in 2016 and started what is now my second act in life, which is involvement in digital medicine. When I came here to Israel, I was a medical director for a digital medical incubator with 30 very, very innovative companies where I tried to help them direct their product to the right market, right people in the United States. And it was then I realized, again, because I had learned this over and over, that access to data is a big problem in healthcare.
Understood. And so that leads us up to LynxMD, that you're chief medical officer for. Who's the customer for that company and for your product, and describe your product?
Yeah, it's a obviously important question, and a little bit more about the origin story. As I was working at this incubator, someone suggested I meet a serial entrepreneur named Omer Dror, who, like a lot of Israelis, is very bright, very talented, very well educated, and was spending his time selling advertising clicks. People said that 20% of the Israeli private sector brain power is spent on digital advertising. And Omer decided he wanted to do something different, and we discussed a bunch of ideas, and both came to the realization, him for the first time, me for the umpteenth time, that accessing medical data is a problem. And so we've come up with what we call a secure data access platform, a way to make it easy, both internally and externally, to get a hold of and organize medical data. Medical data is privileged data and difficult to use for a lot of reasons. One, it's siloed. It's in a bunch of different disparate systems that don't communicate well with each other. And the other is that it contains such important information that there are certain legal prohibitions and requirements one has to go through in order to access the data. So our customers, on the one hand, there are data providers, people since the age of electronic health records. There are people collecting huge amounts of data and not having given much of a thought to where they're putting it and how they're going to use it. And on the other hand, are data consumers. Pharma companies, medical technology companies, and now AI companies all need this data in order to make new products and improve their products, and to really bring medicine into the modern world. And we fit there. We fit in the middle. We help. We're trying to create a marketplace to bring consumers of data to the data in a safe and compliant, governmentally acceptable way.
Understood. And you're right, this has been a conversation that's been going on for a long time. This need has been sorely missed. I remember there were a couple of initial plays that I'm aware of that were done in cancer, where there was a huge macro source of information related to patients who've had cancer with their identities scrubbed. But if you were looking for a male 35 Northeast with a specific cancer, you could find several different patients that meet that criteria, and then treatments that were related to that patient's care. I'm assuming that's kind of what you're proposing as well. You would have a gigantic database where you could slide down and find specific patients who meet certain criteria. Is that kind of where this goes?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the work is in the fact that there's very poor standardization, and almost no two healthcare institutions are alike. And with us, we have this proprietary software, and we can use what people couldn't use in the past, which is really the power of either AWS or Azure or Google Cloud, plus our own tools to sort and catalog the data, so we know what's there.
Right.
And we take the data in an almost as-is form and leave it identified. From a data science standpoint, as you pull out the identifiers, you might the data becomes somewhat less pure. So the idea is, because institutions are so reluctant to part with their data for mostly good reasons, we set up an environment for each data provider where people who want to ask the questions will have to come to the data. They can submit their questions to the cloud. The answers can be run on fully identified data, but the data is then, the answers are de-identified on the fly. And we have what separates us from our competition, and there really isn't anyone doing it not only quite in this way, but with all the features we have. We can provide access to the data in three different levels. If there's an institutional review board, if the hospital X is working with a pharmaceutical company and the Mayo Clinic, and they need identified data and the paperwork is all in place, they can have access to identified data. They can't remove the data from the environment, but they can have access. They could find out who the 35-year-old guy with some terrible disease was. If there's no IRB, they can have access. They can get answers where the data is de-identified. And or the third level is aggregated statistics, which is what most AI algorithms need anyway. They just need to know how accurate their model is.
Right, right. So just backing up a little bit, the customer here would be the industry company looking for data in a specific area. It could be a researcher doing research and needs population data to complete their model. Could be a host of those groups. And currently, the unmet need is this data isn't readily available in volumes that are meaningful, or that they have to kind of hodgepodge different formats together to get enough data to use. Is that a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment. One of the problems is that a lot of the studies are done at the same, top 10% or 20% institutions in the United States.
Mhm.
So there's a whole population of lesser studied people. So does drug A or algorithm B that's run in Palo Alto at Stanford, is it really the same if it's run in some smaller town in Wisconsin?
Mhm.
So it's important that data be available from not just the premier institutions, but from the roll up your sleeves rest of the world kind of places. And what you said is true. The more data for most of these things, the better. And so the more varied the data, the better.
Mhm. Especially from a diverse perspective.
Right.
So is the data on-prem? So hospital A or university research department B has collected this data. They agree to work with Lynx. So do they keep that data on-prem, but when a request comes for data that can be compared at a company, they go through your gateway to gain access to this data where it's de-identified and then deliver it to that particular company? Is that kind of the way that would work?
It's the way it works, except we put the data almost immediately in the cloud, one of the cloud providers, and it turns out, although everybody is appropriately worried about data security, it turns out that Amazon and Microsoft actually do a better job of securing data than most, if not all, hospitals, and we have our own layer of data security. So we feel quite comfortable that putting it up in the cloud, and it makes it does two things. One is it makes it easy to access by anyone with proper access credentials, and the other is it takes the burden off the hospital IT staff. They don't have to approve every request. They don't have to go through security for every request.
Okay.
It's because it becomes most don't have the ability to do this, and each request becomes a one-off, a big ask. So with Lynx as sort of excuse me, as sort of the middleware, once we're up and running and we're told what data is permissible, what access level, the hospital or the institution gets a dashboard. They know exactly what's going on. It's fully auditable, but they don't have to do any more work.
Okay. So who is responsible for establishing the protocols and managing the access to that data? Is that at a local level, or does that go through Lynx where they request the access to the data? How is that part managed?
The requests will go through us, and the approval will be from the hospital, or the practice will have to set up some sort of rapid approval mechanism that, and then, but there should be no more IT heavy lifting.
Good. So what's in the market now? How is this different? What value is this bringing that currently isn't being met? It's clearly the data access is part of it, but it sounds like this is a more streamlined process that allows access to more diverse, complete data. Is that fair, or what additional areas are there?
It is fair. So there are products that often use a proprietary data format where it takes 6 to 12 months to put the data in a special format for use. And that doesn't translate well for users outside the institution. That's not number one. There are some people who try to get or solve the personal health information problem by using something called synthetic data.
Yeah.
But you can't use synthetic data for the kind of data beyond what's known as unstructured data, pictures, genomics, pathology reports. And Lynx is set up to do the whole thing. There are people who do something similar, but only for clinical trials. You know, they aggregate data, they find people who can be in trials, so they add numbers to, you know, greater numbers of people in clinical trials. We have our market is different. We're after, you know, there's a giant switch now where everything that's done by a human will be done by a human plus a machine. There'll be assisted pathology readings, assisted radiology readings, and there's a ton of algorithm validation that's going to be required. And I think for us that's a big market. And there's also, per the FDA, there's a lot of post-marketing stuff that has to go on now for drugs and devices, and that they'll require more than the usual coding data and lab data. They want real world, what they call real world evidence. Do these people who have this expensive procedure or receive this expensive drug, do they really get better? Prove that they're really better and that this is worth it and safe.
Mm-hmm. 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 And of course, all of this is HIPAA compliant and all the other requirements around privacy to the patient and those kinds of things.
Correct. Always a good question. And you know, when we de-identify, we're able to remove all of the HIPAA identifiers, and we use something called differential privacy, which you know, I don't actually know how it works, but I can tell you it's a mathematical thing to prevent the ability to re-identify. It's important when you have not a lot of something. I mean, you know, people age 50 with hypertension, there's a lot of those people. But if it's a rarer disease or something, but somehow differential privacy will not let that leak in data that's identified, that could be with time and effort be identified. It can't happen.
And that's always a challenge, right? Because a lot of those identifiers are key to assist the care of patients who are going through it right now. But from a geographical perspective or racial zip code or whatever nominal piece, that could be the piece that would identify that particular patient. So, you know, the process of scrubbing that identity is key, but at the same time, you want to maintain the efficacy of the data to protect the patient. So smarter people than I are doing that kind of stuff, to be sure. This is really exciting. So how did this idea come about? What was, so you're chief medical officer. How big is your organization, and what was the beginning of this idea?
So we're 15 people, you know, mostly programmers, and you know, when I met with Omer, the CEO, and you know, we talked daily. We met weekly for months and months. The first part was mostly him exclaiming, "It can't work that way." With me, I was explaining to him how the U.S. healthcare system works, which is nearly impossible for an outsider to believe how crazy and chaotic it actually works. But once he understood it and started to ask about availability of large data sets, initially we thought we would do something really cool with AI and diagnoses or something. But Omer quickly realized that it's really hard to get the data. It takes a long time. And so we decided that we would do something to hopefully allow, in Tel Aviv, pre-COVID, on certain streets, every third person has an AI for medicine company. I mean, the number of AI medicine startups is incredible, and those people can't get data. Yeah. And we thought if we could make it easy for people like them and pharma, whatever, to get data, that we'd make a much bigger impact than a single cool, AI model.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So where's the gap? What help do you need as you move to the next stages, and what are those next stages?
It's something we think about frequently. We've raised a fair amount of money, and Omer has a track record here. But startups are always raising money.
Sure.
Post-COVID, it's been very hard to get hospitals' attention. They're worried about existential business risk and keeping their employees out of the ICU. So it's very difficult to talk to them about this. If we talk to 100 people about Lynx, there's a certain relatively small percentage that just doesn't understand it. There's a larger middle group that thinks it's very interesting and would like to learn more. And then there's the tail group where they're incredibly excited and they think it's the greatest thing and they want to move forward. But we, as of yet, we're unable to predict beforehand who those excited people, who the evangelists are going to be. We're trying hard, but we haven't been able to do that. So what we really need is more exposure. We're literally quarantined in Tel Aviv, although there are flights now. But travel in the U.S. will be very difficult, and meeting people will be very, very difficult. So the North Texas healthcare environment is, for lack of a better word, a super target-rich environment. There are a lot of people doing a lot of cool stuff there.
There's no better word. I think you described it pretty well. There's no a better words than that. Okay,
I'll take that. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And we would love some exposure, to find those sort of evangelists who we can talk more to, and they can introduce us to more people.
Perfectly. Hopefully this will help do that. But let's talk about Robert a little bit. So assuming you have some off time, is it books? Is it cooking, movies? What do you do for fun?
That's I always, in my practice as a gastroenterologist, although I saw a wide variety of people with different diseases, it was, I had a practice of tens of thousands of patients. It was hard to remember everybody. And two things helped me remember the people. One is what they did for a living, which I always found fascinating, the variety of stuff. And in the Washington area, a lot of people would say, it's none of your business. What do you mean it's not? I mean, I work for the government. All right, what part of the government? I can't tell you. You work for the CIA? Don't ask me. All out of that. But I also enjoyed asking people what they like to do for fun. And I made a bunch of friendships with patients because I like to fish, freshwater fish, which is a problematic thing in Israel. There's not a lot of fresh water.
Right.
And the Mediterranean isn't exactly teeming with fish any longer, but I love to fish, and when I go back to the U.S., I make it a point to do it. And I would love to go back to Texas with time to actually go bass fishing, which would be a wonderful thing. And And I read a lot. I'm not allowed to cook. You know, my wife is a very, very good cook. Doesn't like eat, doesn't like. I'm sure I'm the only spouse that's ever had this problem. She doesn't like the way I clean up, so I'm pretty much not allowed.
Well,
Yeah, crazy, right? Crazy. So I read quite a bit. You know, I didn't have a lot of my working career. All my reading was professional, except when I would take vacation and on the plane, I can read. So, but now I try to read quite a bit.
So growing up in East Texas near Sam Rayburn Lake, bass fishing is exactly what we did. So
Oh man, yeah.
it's been forever since I've been back there, but growing up, you know, you had your Shimano reel and you went out and knocked them out. Those were the days. Well, Robert, this has been a great conversation.
Likewise. Thanks. Really enjoyed.
I appreciate your time, and we look forward to the next opportunity as we hear the progress that you're making.
Great. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Absolutely. I'll show your email address as well as our website and email address so that we can kind of channel additional conversations back to you. And in the next few weeks, we'll circle back to see where you are.
Thank you.
Robert, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.